Hello there and welcome to episode 1 of the Tartan Daily. I'm Hodgeythehack and I've decided Scotland are at the Euros. I'm doing a podcast about it. And hopefully some people watch, come along and enjoy. And even better than that, I'm a commentator that's no working during the Euros, but I have two people with me who certainly are working during the Euros. I have with me to my left Andy Bargh, who's going to be covering the Scotland-England game for TalkSPORT and also does, as you can see by his handle there, the Hampden Roar podcast. How are you doing, Andy?
Very excited. I can't just say I'm doing fine or I'm doing well. I'm just very excited all the time.
I know, mate. I think the whole of Scotland is. Like, we're sort of, I don't know, we're maybe in that stage between reverie and excitement, and then obviously the impending pain and doom lies ahead. But we're still at that point where that's not a factor yet. And then we also have the man just below me here on the stream, whose voice has become synonymous, I would say, with Scottish football over the last decade or so, particularly when the action was on BT Sport. It's Rory Hamilton. Rory, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing, mate?
Thank you very much for having me on. I am equally excited, and it just seems to be growing every day. You know, like that excitement is just building, and it's just. I was thinking it last night. I was like, is this what every country feels every 2 years? But it's probably not, because when it's been 23 years, you've just got that build up of excitement over that entire time, and it's just exploding right now in Scotland.
Yeah, that's precisely it. And now people are watching, so if you want to get in touch, please do so with some comments. Say hello, let us know you're there. And if you have questions for any of the guys, then let me know. Now, we're going to cover a few things today. With these podcasts, you always want to keep it kind of loose and ready, but we do have an intention of covering a bit about the Scotland squad, a bit about these guys, the work they'll be doing, their buzz for the Euros, my buzz for the Euros. And then we'll also maybe just begin to cast a bit of an eye on the opposition. But I'm going to be doing these every day, so I need to keep some topics up my sleeve, short as it is, for later episodes. But lads, Scotland are at the Euros. Now, let's kick off with, I mean, what are your memories of Scotland growing up? So I'll start off by telling you a bit about mine. I remember sitting with my cousin Stevie, who sadly is no longer with us, which makes this tournament quite a kind of emotional thing for me. And we when the Scotland Euro 96 games were on, I was just a wee boy, and we had a foosball table, right? And it had 4 legs on it. But that actually made it a kind of makeshift goal that he could like kick in. You know, one of those wee soft footballs that's got the kind of puff stuff inside of it so that it doesn't break anything. And he was just kicking that at me, like as we were watching us play against Holland, play against Switzerland and the likes. The England game, there was no nonsense. Like I was told in no uncertain terms that we're not going to have any nonsense foosball. This is serious business. And I don't remember, like, you know, that way you can remember a feeling rather than what you see.
Yeah.
And I can just remember the despondency after McAllister missed the penalty, and then like disbelief when Gaza went up and scored that goal. You know, and
if that penalty went in, we would have won that game.
Oh, absolutely.
We were all over them.
I watched it. I watched it back. They did a rerun in the Beeb. Was it maybe a year ago or something? And I watched it back. And do you know the thing that struck me, Rory, was how different is football now? Like, have you ever watched that game back?
I've not
crazy.
Actually.
No,
I wouldn't put myself through the pain of that game again.
I'd see when you know it's coming, it's not quite as bad. Like I think you're kind of inoculated before you go in. But I'm
sure there's a term for people that get a kick out of that sort of thing.
Well, granted. Don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, mind you. Now, the other factor here is like that. So that's one. That's my Euros memories of Scotland. The other one was France '98, and I remember greeting when we get beat by Brazil. Like I just couldn't handle it. Like I was a wee guy, but by that point I was old enough that I really cared about football. Like that 2 years made a massive difference. But at that point, you just thought, this happens all the time. I'll have more of these to enjoy. You know what I mean? And here I am, poorly shaven at 32, with my hair all over the gaff, and like this is the next one we get to look forward to. But that's basically my list of memories of watching Scotland at a major tournament. What about yourselves? Start off with you, maybe, Andy.
I'm a bit younger, which I take great pleasure in reminding you of. So I think 98, similar to what you were saying there about remembering a feeling. This is exactly the same with me at 98. I was 4, just about to turn 5. And I remember a busy living room. I had my face painted, but I can recollect nothing about the game. Can't remember Scotland's penalty or the own goal. Nothing. I just remember a busy living room and there being a wave of excitement. My first, I remember distinctly watching the playoff against Holland. I would have been 9, maybe 10 at that point. Watched that with my pal Rory around at his house. Plays for Kilmarnock now, actually, Rory McKenzie. Watched that over at his, and I remember that very, very clearly. And when I started really I can remember the Volts era. Walter Smith came in, but I think when we were trying to qualify for Euro 2008, that is really when it took off for me. And that I can remember, I've got the DVD review of that campaign. That's how big it was, how close we came. We brought out a DVD about it. And I've watched that loads of times, and I can remember everything very, very clearly. My dad used to take me to friendlies. I've seen us get pumped off Hungary, Switzerland. It was just crap games at Hampden in the dark throughout the early noughties. I was there for most of them. But the moment it started to take off for me was the 2008 campaign. And before that, I can remember the Holland playoff very, very clearly.
Aye, that goal in the first leg, it felt like that was the beginning. Like, I can remember thinking at that point, we've got a great young team now. Like, we're going to go on and do great things with these guys. And obviously, this is the first time we've actually managed to get there. And let's be honest, we kind of got there through a bit of a back door. It was Alex McLeish in the Nations League that we still have to thank for even getting to the point where we had a playoff to play in. Yeah. But Rory, you're a wee bit older than us, so you've maybe got a few. You get any more tournaments you get? Sorry, man. You get any more tournaments you can call upon, in terms of your memories? And by the way, Andy, I'm quite interested in the parallel with how at a certain age it's a feeling you remember, and then it's like a more kind of visual thing. Was it similar for you, Rory? Because I'm just thinking of a kind of age gap with maybe the 90s.
90s totally. Because just doing rough calculations, I've got 5 years on you and another 5 on Andy. So all of that just shifts slightly along the timeline. Yeah. So Andy's France 98 becomes my Italia 90, and just sort of not quite memories. I knew the games were on. I watched them, but didn't really quite understand. I'd have been 6 at the time. So you're just at school. You're getting into kicking a ball, but you don't maybe really understand the professional game. So 92 is really the first one that I remember really getting excited about, because by then you're playing like boys club football, and so that's all you're talking about with your mates. I remember the Dutch game. I think was our opening game, and going round to my mate's house to watch it up in Cardress, guy Gordon Pace. And he just got it was like a little boxing punch bag, and we were watching the opening titles, and basically when they ran the opening titles of the last Euros, the big moments and things, as Van Basten hit that volley against the USSR, it's one of the greatest goals of all time. He punched the punch bag and it hit me right in the face, and I just thought, we've got no chance against these boys. Like, if they've got guys like that in their team, and then you saw like Hullet and Rijkaard, and I was like, no, this is we're not at this level. But there's only 8 teams at that tournament. It's so different. And then so 94 is probably at the real height of your like childish football fever. Yeah, that was like, to me, that's probably my mastermind subject of choice, just like 94 World Cup, because I was just so into it. You watch every game, you study every team, and so on. 96, you're probably getting really into that. Obviously 94 Scotland weren't there, but I remember 96 being more nervous than excited. I think knowing that the England game was on the horizon. You'd reached the stage where you realised what being a Scotland fan was. It wasn't all just about excitement. 98, brilliant. Actually loved it. I think by then I'd maybe just softened all my expectations. So it was like, that felt, and particularly having the opening game, it's so exciting just to be a part of that think
Totally.
that I found very special. And of course, you get the absolute sickener with the Morocco game. But like Andy, I think the height of my being a fan came in that qualification for 2008, and they were the first group game or qualification group games that I went to. We travelled out to the 2006 World Cup in my old beaten up Fiesta that had about 100,000 miles on the clock, and there were all sorts of stuff. It got impounded in Munich when we were in Prague and came back to an empty car space, all this kind of thing. And then, so yeah, the first away games that we did were Lithuania when we won 2-0, and then France and Italy in that group, which was, I mean, when you're winning in Paris, you're like, oh, come on. I mean, 10 years is far too long for Scotland not to be a major tournament. Surely it's coming along soon.
Yeah. And just on that note, Ollie Middleton's got in touch asking a question. He's saying, any players who didn't get a chance to play at a major tournament over the past 20 years you'd want in the squad? And he says McFadden for me all day. Now, you mentioned that. Now, I was doing a shift, a commentary shift recently where I was doing EFL down in London. And I was surrounded like entirely by English guys, right? And like the subject of like favourite footballers ever came up. And like, what about you, Hodgie? And I was like, James McFadden, right? And people were like, what? Right? But just because he scored a couple of good goals for Scotland. And I was like, no. James McFadden is the embodiment of like the line between genius and sort of like he's right in that middle space. So like in one parallel universe, James McFadden is Lionel Messi, and in another parallel universe, he's playing for like Bede Juniors or something. You know what I mean? Like he's just in that bit right in the middle where he's capable of these amazing sort of feats of fait accompli, and then like obviously other elements of his game mean that he sometimes, especially in club level, was often kind of drifting in the periphery of games. But I just think someone that sits right in that sweet spot and gave me, I should say, like, and again, this comes down to like age and growing up, just so many memories of like, wow, you know? Like,
and Hodgie, McFadden's goal against France is always going to be the one that sticks out, even ahead of the Holland playoff game. There's one of my
Macedonia as well. Like that was some goal.
One of my favourite Scotland games of all time was when we beat Ukraine 3-1. I cannot find a fault in that game. Phenomenal. And McFadden's sealer in that with maybe about 15, 20 minutes to go when we weren't exactly under the cosh, but the game was still in the balance, 2-1 against Ukraine, who could very easily peg us back with another goal. And McFadden sealed it with that driven finish in at the near post. And that was an absolutely perfect day because, and I made this point in another podcast recently, that was the game I think where we expected it to fall apart. It had been going too well, and obviously it did fall apart in the last two games, but it had been going too well, and at some point we knew we're going to get caught out here. And Ukraine coming to Hampden, who had been in the quarter-final of the World Cup a year ago,
Rebrov, Shevchenko, Timoshuk.
Unbelievable.
And we thought, okay, we've had a good run, but this is maybe where we come unstuck today against a really good team. And then we were 2-0 up after 10 minutes. Lee McCullough's goal, which is
McCullough's goal in that one.
Favourite goals ever.
It, and it was unbelievable, that goal.
Yeah, and McFadden, because he scored in 3 consecutive games. McFadden, he scored against France, he scored a screamer against Lithuania, and he scored against Ukraine as well. And he was the boy during that campaign. I love players like that no matter how they're performing at club level, they will turn up for Scotland.
That's it.
I would probably include Sean Maloney in that category as well. And I would also currently probably include Ryan Christie in it.
That's an interesting parallel to draw, and thanks for bringing it forward. I'm gonna say one more thing just about Faddy, and like I think the key thing for me is when I look back at those memories. Right now, we're talking about a Scotland team that I watched draw 2 each in the Faroe Islands and stuff like that, right? So you're going into games with, like, let's be honest, for the most part, and barring that one campaign that you guys have both highlighted, for the most part, it was like a sense of dread. But Faddy was the one that gave you hope. Like, he was the one that could change the game, and you always thought, as long as McFadden's on the pitch, something can happen, we can score a goal. And
you brought up that Macedonia goal as well.
Oh, what a goal, man!
That's one of my favourite goals in football. It's just, and there's only a handful of players that could have scored a goal like that.
Yeah,
that's our side of Wyron moment. Although that's probably too early for you boys in '94.
I've seen the goal you speak of, but what I would say is it's the wee feint he does that you don't notice until you watch the replay it's kind of hard to sort of clock it. But if you watch, there's a shot of it where it's like it might be behind the goal or to the side of the goal. There's a camera on him, and you can actually see like the bit of body language that he does and what he does with his face, and it's a feat of genius. And
I wish that goal meant something more than just a moment. It deserved it.
But it's football not about moments, Andy.
Oh, wow, we're getting deep.
We're getting philosophical. This is great.
As a Scotland fan, probably, yeah, it is, because that's all we've had to grasp onto. And I know I'm wearing a Man United shirt, and I'm not a Man U fan, but the fans of successful clubs like that, they're like, for example, when Roy Keane and Dwight York scored against Juventus in '99, they went on to win the trophy. When Makeda scored that goal in his debut against Villa about 10 years ago, they went on to win the Premier League after that last-minute goal. So these moments in isolation, which triggered unbelievable scenes, then continued to go on to a greater meaning and a moment of an achievement. Whereas our Griffiths moment, and amazing as it was in isolation, we didn't reach the playoffs. If we'd stopped Harry Kane from scoring, or if we'd held out in Slovenia, we would have made it. And we could look back at that Griffiths moment and say that really was the catalyst for something, even though we still look back and value it as the most adrenaline-feeling moment of most of our lives.
It was.
We blew that group big time.
Yeah,
that was probably the one. You know, even you look at the sort of 2008 qualification. I think that was actually the group that we blew
more than the one with Poland and Ireland.
That's a good point, actually.
See, to be fair, there have been a few, but there's only been a couple of instances, I would say, where the draw's been even semi-kind to us, and those were two.
I think, Rory, I think you're right, because the World Cup is harder to reach than
much harder.
The Euros. Yeah, and it felt like a World Cup was within our grasp to reach the playoffs anyway, because we did the hard bit against Slovakia with the last-minute own goal when Chris Martin was involved.
We were the masters of the last-minute goals in that that qualification campaign.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. But there's been lots of qualification campaigns. This one ended in the most dramatic of fashion. Scotland's first ever penalty shootout. And I did a wee video. It was the first ever thing I did live on Twitter, and now I've become just like a junkie for doing this live streaming stuff. But yeah, like I did a video because I just needed to release. Because what happened was we were watching. It was my sister and our man's anniversary, so we were watching the Waynes. And in the first half, I was like watching it in my mum and dad's living room, having to dampen like the sounds that I was making. And then I remembered Sky were showing it free to air on like one of the main sort of Sky channels. So I then went across to my wee sister's house to watch the second half and extra time and what have you. And obviously that allowed me to shout expletives and do as you do. But at full time, I had nobody to talk to or celebrate with. So I was like, oh, do you know what? I'll just talk to the internet. And I remember saying during that, like, the one thing that we can always hold over England, or at least for now, is, I mean, we're better at penalties than you guys. So, ha, ha, ha.
But who would have thought that was our true calling?
Penalty masters.
Exactly.
No, I think, so during that game, like, let's look at that Serbia game for a wee minute, because describe your emotions, because for 85 to 87 minutes of that game, we absolutely bossed it, like genuinely all over it. And then Scott McTominay, who'd done really well as the makeshift centre-back, falls asleep at a set piece, and then we concede. And then after that, it's like through the cracks in the fingers time, like that extra time period. And do you know who the one guy that I thought, like, Dykes, obviously, you would point to, but for me, Declan Gallagher that night was outstanding. Like, and let's not being unfair to Declan Gallagher, like, but he's playing at a level of football where international football's maybe like the higher echelons of it. Maybe he's stretching himself, he's stretching his levels and his abilities to perform at that level. And that night, he stood up and he stands tall, and he was counted. Like, he was so good. And for me, that's why we'll talk about the construction of the defence in a wee bit, but his name's right in the frame for me because he was so good that night in such a pivotal game. But emotionally,
he got an early booking as well, a totally unjustified one, with only about 20 or 30 minutes played. He had to tread carefully for the rest of the game. He didn't put a foot wrong. No,
he was brilliant. But emotionally, what was that like for you lads? Because I went through the emotional ringer that night.
I think it was. I think it was just purely nerves the entire time. It was. You obviously get your moment when Christie scores, and that's your elation. But the entire time, I was just on the edge of my seat. Just you want it to end to put you out of this experience. But that's what watching football is all about. That it takes your emotions to extreme levels, whatever the emotion is, be it joy, be it despair, be it nerves. That you go past, you take it to 11, sort of thing.
That's it, and it definitely gets amplified when it's your country, doesn't it? Like, it gets amplified, I think. Because someone asked me on one of my channels, like, are you club or country first? And I'm a Norwich City fan, so through working for the club and such, like, I've become a Norwich fan, and I love Norwich to bits. They will always be the team that I love now. But my country's my country, Like, and I've always had a higher level of emotional engagement, other than maybe when club teams are playing in Europe. I always think my level of engagement has been so much more. It's almost like you're more kind of present in the moment. Do you know what I mean? Like when you're watching Scotland, and that's the thing for me.
I don't know how Andy feels. It'll be interesting to see how Andy feels, because he's at the sort of starting point of his career, and I've found that over the time that I've been in the business, because I was an assistant producer for years before getting into commentary. And
that's a really helpful grounding, man. Like, actually.
Yeah, it's so handy to understand, particularly just what's going on at an OB, at a live game, to understand what everyone is doing. So when you're an assistant producer, I was the guy that was, like, picking out the replays to put out. Brilliant. So the lengths that people are having to go to in the trucks, and those trucks are a stressful environment. There's folks shouting everywhere, and you've got to be really switched on and level-headed to make sure that you make
condensed
the right
as well. Like, I can't imagine, like, in your sort of post,
and it's all dark.
You've
just got screens and lights and buttons, and those buttons are all live. And if you press the wrong one, it just puts like a clock up instead of a replay, and you're like, no. Thankfully, I never did that. But I've found that over time and quite quickly, I lost all form of club allegiance, because I was always working at it. And so I always, it was the Liechtenstein home game when Stephen McManus scored in the last
97th minute.
Yeah. I worked, so I'd just gone freelance, and I'd just got a little in at Sky, and they'd offered me a gig doing stats on that game. So you were sitting with a computer, and when Scotland had possession, you pressed like A, and when Macedonia had possession, you pressed R, and when there was a corner, you hit another thing, and all this kind of thing. Because I thought, I'd gone to all the Scotland games up until then, but I thought, look, I've got to take this shift. I need to start getting the bank account going in the right direction.
Joys of freelance work, mate.
Well, exactly. And I thought, look, come on, Liechtenstein at home. If there's a game to miss in this campaign, it's this one. And obviously we know what happened. And I was just like, I was watching it going, my mates are in the crowd there, going absolutely, limbs everywhere. And I missed that moment because I'm hitting a keyboard. And I said at that moment, Scotland's the team that I support. You have to keep that to make sure you remain a fan, because otherwise you get so caught up in it being your profession that you lose. I've lost those moments for club games. Yeah. So that's fine. But you got to remind yourself that first and foremost, you're a football fan. You're in this because you love the game so much. So you got to keep something for yourself. And for me, it's Scotland.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally echo that. And it's where, like, obviously, I mean, for you guys, congratulations to you both. It's amazing that you are both working on the Euros. And it's always nice to see, I think, like, other Scottish commentators going on and doing well, you know, and getting those plum gigs, especially like Rory. I mean, look, without doing too much brown nosing here, like I thought when you were doing the BT Sports stuff, it was one of those things where this new voice emerged to me that I hadn't heard before, and immediately you commanded a bit of gravitas and authority, and that for me is the key thing. If someone comes across that they've got that and they're not forcing it down your throat, I always think that's one of the key aspects of being a good commentator, as well as obviously not making it entirely about yourself, which I've never thought that you've done. And I think that's why it's nice to see like a couple of Scots, and like yourself, Andy, as well, going on and getting these gigs. And it's nice as well that there's going to be a bit of balance, like from a fan's point of view, to the coverage, you know, because I think if I was listening to Sam Matterface, like I would be struggling a wee bit. And even Clive Tilsley, who was like one of my favourite commentators and one of my commentary heroes, I couldn't stand watching him do England games. But that's just because I've got that sort of what a lot of my English friends would term a small-minded Scottish attitude. But like I always argue, like we're the ones getting beaten up for dinner money in the school playground. That's the kind of vibe of the union, you know. So on that basis, yeah, I've always had that kind of antagonistic thing. And obviously, having lived in England and all my best pals are English and stuff now, then I mean it's a bit different. But when it comes to Scotland and Scotland in a group with England, then my sort of nationalistic and kind of jingoistic vibe with that is very much coming to the fore again, and like quite proudly as well. Like I know so many English people, and so many English people are in my orbit now that are my pals, but like I am wholeheartedly wishing like the worst for them at this tournament. If they go out at the group stage, I will be absolutely ecstatic. Although I will feel a bit sorry for Gareth Southgate in a holistic sort of way, but no, there's no chance of that happening. How do you think the group's going to go then? Like, what's a realistic expectation for Scotland in this group, do you think?
It's realistic expectation, probably realistic to get out the group. I'm not going in with that expectation, though, because we surely have learned by now that we should not expect we should not expect great things. We should obviously hope for them and never let that hope die, because that's part of the reason that what keeps us going as a Scotland fan for these moments. That all rests for me in the first game. If we can beat the Czechs, then what a position we're in. If we lose, we've got then 2 really difficult games to try and claim 3 points. I looked at the 2016 standings, and 3 points and a positive goal difference was enough to get you through. 2 teams went out as a third place finisher on 3 points with a negative goal difference. So if we can beat Czech Republic and get a point off any of the others, then we should be absolutely guaranteed to get through to the last 16. If we can beat Czech Republic, and if we lose to the other 2, keep it as narrow as we possibly can, then we should still have a chance. But I don't think we can afford to be playing catch up after losing to the Czechs.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. What about you, Rory? What do you think?
I wish that game was last. I wish the Czech game was last, because I think even if I think there could be a mentality that a draw might be enough. You know, don't start with a defeat. I can see that almost being in the headspace, particularly with the, best third place. I mean, I think it's a ridiculous format. 24 teams and only cutting 8 from the group stage. You play that many games to get rid of 8 teams. It's a daft fork. 24 is a number. It's not a prime number. It doesn't work. for a tournament for me. So
that's the statistician coming forth there.
There's the standard grade maths coming into play. I think it can play with your mentality a little bit. I can imagine Scotland thinking, if it's 1-1 with 10 minutes to go, not to risk it, take the point that you've got.
Oh no, I hate when we do
which I would not like. I would far rather. I always say, lose a game trying to win it, rather than not trying to lose it.
Yeah.
If you get what I mean.
Well, no, I totally do. Like in Scotland, so many times I've seen us sit on like a lead or sit on the point that we're going to get, and I've genuinely very, very seldom seen it end well.
Oh yeah, look, we're not Italy from the 90s. We're not going to
catenaccio our way through the group.
Arese and Maldini at the back. I mean, we're not going to sit on a 1-0 lead. Like, just going to go and get the second goal. Having a cushion is really nice. But. So I would rather that game was last, because I think even if we win it, it almost gives us a false sense of security. And you can very quickly find yourself, if we were then to lose at Wembley, and then you're 1-0 down to Croatia, you're in real trouble at that stage, probably because you've got yourself in a nice position and you can relax a little bit.
Rory, I don't know about you, but I am feeling, maybe because it's not in our immediate future, as in the next game, but I'm actually a lot less nervous for the Croatia game, because I feel that the burden of expectation isn't weighing so heavily on us for that one, and I prefer Scotland to go into the game without that and as the underdog. I think that Croatia are obviously a very, very strong side, and you just need to look through the clubs that their players represent. It's Champions League level, strong Europa League level. I mean, they're not a spent force that have suddenly exploded or imploded, since the 2018 World Cup. They're still world-class players. But I think that if we go into that game without the fans expecting us to just turn them over, which part of me worries we are expecting to happen against the Czechs, then I think we stand a better chance maybe of getting something, at least a point from the Czech Republic game. That I'm really fearful that there is a false sense of expectation being put on the Czech Republic game, that we are. I think it's maybe debatable if we're the favourites or not. It's maybe a toss of a coin, but I think that people are expecting Czech Republic to turn up and leave with nothing, based on the fact that we now have a pretty good squad put together.
I think that's a fair comment, and I see the denouement of this group going one of two ways, right? So either we beat the Czech Republic, then we lose in a Scottish way to England. So like something unfortunate, or something where we've been the architects of our own downfall. And then a fraught 90 minutes against Croatia, where we're probably going to need the draw, because we'll be the first team to go out with a positive goal difference or something in the format, right? Some really Scottish. If you look at the Euro 96 and Holland, England conceding that late goal to Holland and that being what put us out eventually. I always argued that David Seaman let that in, but anyway. So that's one sort of set of circumstances. The other one is we get beat, or we drop points anyway against the Czech Republic. We do something against England. We put in a performance that gives us hope, right? Maybe get a draw again, and then we play against Croatia and we fight valiantly. And there we go.
Both your scenarios have us going out.
No,
this is a mentality that I think Scotland need to ditch. I know.
I'm sorry.
Glorious failure for me is a banned phrase.
Yeah.
I hate the term glorious failure. That there's something predetermined that we're going to stuff it up from a really good position. I mean, I see if we got to the final and lost, people would go, "Oh, that's glorious failure again, Scotland." You're like, no,
that's success, man.
That's just glorious.
Yeah, that's success. If we can emulate Wales, right, or anything like that, then that would be amazing. If we can get out the groups and through a knockout game, My goodness. And do you know what? I want to get through the group in the top 2. I know that's like, I know I've got us going out, right? But I'm also entitled, right? I don't want us going through because the format lends itself to us getting through. I want us to get through because we deserve to get through as one of the top 2 teams. Also, if we finish second...
England are the obvious favourites for the group, but they're also slow starters. I mean, they never really set the place alight early doors in a tournament. In fact, throughout a tournament, they do tend to sort of stumble their way through it. So I could see them dropping points. I can see us second, third, or fourth in that group. I think all are almost of a equal possibility.
Yeah, I'm kind of subscribed to that as well. I think there is a chance we get through. I really actually do. I know both of my scenarios had us going out, right? That's just because it's that inbuilt sort of Scottish mentality that's not going to go well.
Sorry, Hodge,
carry on.
The permutations of the group are really interesting because the winner of our group plays whoever finishes third in Group F, and that is the group with France, Germany, and Portugal. So England or Croatia, or maybe us, whoever wins the group is going to have an absolute nightmare tie.
I was going to say that finishing second's almost beneficial.
Whoever finishes second in our group plays the second place finisher from the group that has Spain, Sweden, Poland, and Slovakia. So let's say we expect Spain to win that. If whoever finishes second in our group is pretty much guaranteed an easier last 16 tie. And I know that these are all hypotheticals and permutations that we can't predict the future from. But England had the same problem in the last World Cup when there was a chat about should English lose to Belgium because then it will give them an easier route to the quarterfinal. But I think it's. I'm not saying that Scotland should go out and if we're sitting top of the group, purposefully lose our last game. I'm not suggesting that for a minute. But it's just interesting that you can win the group and be rewarded with a much trickier game than if you finish second.
Aye. I think, again, does that maybe lend... I mean, part of it's the draw, but also the format has influenced like the way that the draw's been done, you know? Yeah. So I think there are a few questions to be raised. Just on that as well, this sort of pan-European thing, how do we feel about that briefly?
The having it in all different cities?
Yeah, and not in one place or 2 countries or one country.
I don't like it at all. As a fan... that would have been travelling to the tournament. You want a base. I think a tournament needs it. That thousands of fans descend on somewhere and travel around and really experience the place. None of this was built for fans' enjoyment. This was built for making money.
I think it's maybe convenient, Rory, that the virus has happened and UEFA can kind of just gloss over this.
I think a little bit, and I think they'll put it behind them and they'll not do it again. I really hope. I think it's a really flawed concept that fans just aren't taken into account. And when we were talking about commentary before, and obviously Andy and I have got a couple of gigs for the Euros, it was going to be a real dilemma if this was a normal tournament, a normal attendances at the games, and Andy might be the same, whether you would want to be working or you'd want to be out there for 2 weeks with your mates. And I'd been asked on various podcasts about it. And I said, I really don't know. This one was made easy. A, because there's going to be 15,000 at the games. Mm-hmm. B, because it's also, our games are at Hampden and Wembley. Hampden you go to all the time. Wembley I've been to enough times. And the third thing and the main thing was that it's not in any random European country, be it Germany, Sweden, Poland, like wherever.
Yeah,
I love that travel and I love experiencing everything that you get in our country, and you can really immerse yourself into it. This one you can't. I think even if it was in normal non-COVID times, you'd be like, our next game's in Bilbao, fly into Bilbao and we'll fly home the next day. And it's just not it's not a proper tournament. I don't like it.
I'm totally with you, Rory, that it's not something that I had ever expected to happen for me. This tournament, it kind of came out of the blue, and so I hadn't tried to weigh up the keeping profession and passion as separate, which I do think the point you made earlier is an important one. My heartstrings are with Scotland, not a club, and I don't want to lose that ever. And I think that if this was a tournament where, let's say that Spain was the host and we could map out, travelling between Seville and Valencia and Barcelona or whatever for Scotland's group games, and everyone would be going together, it would be a difficult a decision to make, I think, for people like us, especially that this has come around for the first time in 23 years. It's not a guarantee that we can say, oh, well, if we work at this one, we'll just be a fan at the next one, because who knows when it might happen.
Well, it would be the most Scottish thing ever if the tournament that we qualify for is the one at Hampden, and then we get to a dry World Cup in Qatar.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I think on the note that you are saying there, obviously, delighted for you both to be working it. And I mean, had I had the opportunity, probably a lot of the same methodology, thought-wise, that you've gone through there, Rory, would apply. But I'm also really looking forward to watching a couple of the group games just in the living room with my mum and dad. Like that. That's going to be lovely, because
I'd rather in a bar in Split or something, though.
I know if there was a tournament to go to, then I always said the next Scottish sort of major tournament we get to, I'm there. Right now, that's the reason that I'm going down to London. I've also got some work sort of that I'm doing as well, but I'm going down to London for the week of the Wembley game for the build-up, and then I'll be flying back up on the Monday night. Now, part of the reason that I'm doing that is because I want to make sure that I watch the 2 home games at home, because there's no better alternative. And then I want to go down and sample the atmosphere down in London. And it's obviously going to be different, and it's going to be a bit weird with the sort of COVID stuff. And obviously I've got the thing that I'm going down there for work, so there's no questions on that kind of side of things. But I think I totally get it. But I think the other thing that I'm kind of getting at here is, this is going to be special for people, because it's been that long that there's going to be memories created, whether that memory's in a bar with your mates, whether that memory is in the living room with your mum and dad, whether that memory's like you guys, brilliant professional milestones, whatever it might be. This is going to be something that Scotland fans cherish and remember, and will hopefully always hark back to in a positive way after we go and qualify and stomp the group. Now, I just want to have a bit of discussion about the actual squad. So I'm going to bring it up for us to have a wee look at. Now, I was really, really happy with the pool of Scotland players that was picked. So we just looked through it there. For anyone who's listening to this in audio format, you've got Craig Gordon, David Marshall, John McLaughlin are the goalkeepers, defenders, Liam Cooper, Declan Gallagher, Grant Hanley, Jack Hendry, Scott McKenna, Stephen O'Donnell, Nathan Patterson, Andy Robertson, Greg Taylor, Kieran Tierney, midfielders, Stuart Armstrong, Ryan Christie, John Fleck, James Forrest, Ryan Fraser, Billy Gilmore, John McGinn, Callum McGregor, Scott McTominay, David Turnbull, and then forwards are Shea Adams, Lyndon Dykes and Kevin Nisbet. That's just in the order it comes in the sheet, by the way. So the fact that I'm listing wingers as midfielders and stuff is just by the by. But what do you think of that pool of players, gents? I think Kenny McLean would probably more than likely have been in there, or would have been in there, had he not suffered an injury. That's obviously given the chance to maybe put a couple of wild cards in there as well, with the expanded pool of 26. What do you think of the group that we've selected, or that Steve Clarke selected, though, overall? I mean, I'm not sure I would change from who's fit and who's available. I'm not sure I would change anyone for that squad, and I cannot remember saying that about a single Scotland squad in recent memory, really. But do you guys concur with that, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think there are very few flashpoints.
On you go, Andy.
Sorry, very few flashpoints and really debatable choices in this Scotland squad. I was not sure if James Forrest would make it, personally. And I feel that he is a bit lucky, because he scored a hat-trick against Israel, but not fit for the vast majority of the season. And I don't think he has much credit in the bank as a Scotland player, James Forrest. He doesn't perform routinely for Scotland the way that he has for Celtic in the last 3 or 4 seasons. There was a talking point, to be fair, between Nisbet or probably Griffiths. I'm on board with the choice of Nisbet.
Me too.
I think that's absolutely fine. the squad as a whole, there's very little debate to be had around it. I think that the main debate is the starting 11, even though Clark, I think, is more than hinted what his first choice 9 or 10 players are.
Yeah, I think
what you see with with that squad and what you'll see throughout Steve Clarke's time, be it with Scotland, be it with Kilmarnock, is loyalty is a massive factor, and that's why there aren't really many surprises. I think he used the extra 3, with a squad of 26, the 3 extra selections to bring in some young guys. So that's where the
Patterson, Gilmore,
the likes of Billy Gilmore and Nathan Patterson got their chance. David Turnbull probably as well as the third one. I think he probably should have been in the squads in the March games, just to give him a wee taste of it. I think of any Celtic player, he was one that really stood out this year. But I think that's why James Forrest gets the nod, is because he might not have as much credit as Andy says in a Scotland jersey, but Steve Clarke knows exactly what he gets from him. So if he's not had a great season with Celtic, obviously he's been injured the vast majority of the time, Steve Clarke knows exactly what he's going to get from him. So he's always going to be loyal to those sorts of players. One that I thought might get a chance was Ryan Gauld. I would like to see him in the squad at some stage, but that's central midfield. You look through it and you're like, well, who do you drop out of that? John Fleck, arguably, having had Sheffield United having such a poor season, but he's the one that's been in the squad the entire time, and that's where Steve Clarke, he's just big on that team mentality, creating a club atmosphere, and you don't want to mess with that too much.
Gauld will get a chance, Rory. I'm certain of it, because he's going to get a good move this summer. He's a free agent that everyone in Portugal knows about him. Clubs in Europe and England will know about him. I think it's important, though, to differentiate between the centre mids. We've got 8 of them, but they come in like 2 blocks of 4. So I don't think we can say Fleck was picked over Gauld, because they're different centre mids. I think if anything, it was Turnbull that was picked over Ryan Gauld, because ahead of Gauld in the queue, undisputably, is McGinn, Christie, and Armstrong for that attacking role. And then Turnbull has come in as the 4th instead of Gauld. And then with Ryan Jack and Kenny McLean's injury, that is probably what has seen Billy Gilmore and John Fleck included. So I think we need to. I think just because they're centre mids, they're different positions. And Gauld is just, unfortunately for him and all his fans at the moment, there are too many players ahead of him in the queue that haven't let Clarke down.
It's interesting that's the area of the team that's very, very strong. Because I think Scotland, I think for quite a while now we've had a decent midfield, but I think we're now blessed with some really good options, and some really we can mix it up just by changing the personnel, and that's quite a good position to be in. Now, there's obviously, after the impressive cameos in the Luxembourg game, and probably before that as well, a clamour to get Nathan Patterson in at right back and to give Billy Gilmore a chance in midfield. Now, I'm fairly certain that neither of them will start the opening game, and I would be surprised if they started any game unless we really need to twist our hand, maybe get into the final game against Croatia. But I mean, where do you guys stand on that? Do you? Because I'll be honest, Stephen O'Donnell has, and hopefully not annoy Andy too much here, because I'm sure it's somebody you quite like, Andy. I've watched him a lot for Kelly TV in the past. Stephen O'Donnell is a player that there was an instance actually in that Luxembourg game that kind of highlighted it for me. They had I think it was a corner. We headed it away. Andy Robertson was in the right wing, and he was sort of streaking up, and it was just his sort of athleticism, awareness, all of those things coming to the fore, giving us a great platform for a counter-attack. He played a wee pass into Stephen O'Donnell, and he bluttered it with his foot and lost control of it, and the move fell to bits. And I just thought that totally highlights how we've got a world-class left back and, let's be honest, a pretty functional right back. So I think there's been a bit of a clamour from people after Nathan Patterson's impressive sort of cameos and influence that he had when he came in for Tavernier for Rangers. I think a lot of people want to see him given a chance. And then likewise, Billy Gilmour's gone and won a Champions League medal. There's only a handful of Scottish players who've ever done that. So I think given, and Billy Gilmour, by the way, most of the times I've seen him start for Chelsea, he has been an absolute focal point and really, really impressed. So there's no doubt that these are two players with bags and bags of ability and potential. But is it too early to start them, would you guys say? No, I'm not asking what Steve Clarke will do, because I don't think he will. But if you guys were in charge, if you were selecting the first 11 for that first game, would you select either of them?
When you go, Rory.
I think that both of them are good enough to start and arguably improve the team on a purely just a sort of technical level. I think that they are good enough and they will become better than possibly their competition. Mm-hmm. But neither of them have big game experience, really.
That's it.
I mean, Billy Gilmour, I think, is absolutely superb. But since Thomas Tuchel has come in, I think he's played 2.5 Premier League games for Chelsea. It's not enough. He really needs to either get himself bumped up the pecking order in that squad. He is still young, or he needs to go out on loan. He has to be playing games. He'll be having a great time in training and learning from incredible players around him. But there's no substitute for playing in big games. Wonderful being on the bench for a Champions League final, getting all that experience, but it's not the same as playing football. So, and it does come back also to the loyalty thing. And Steve Clarke knows what he can get from Stephen O'Donnell and, let's say, Callum McGregor, who's probably a similar type of player to Billy Gilmour. So, yeah, I would start the more experienced guys, certainly in the first game. It might be something that the others work their way into, because they might be absolutely bossing the training park. And Steve Clarke might say by game 3, look, this guy's got to go in. So I think they could work their way into it. I would say most likely Nathan Patterson. I think right back's a position that is a little bit more up for grabs than in the middle, just because there's so much competition in there.
I would say so. Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say about Callum McGregor is I think he's really, and I think part of this is, if you look at Celtic's last 4 seasons, there's been maybe a month stoppage when you look at the end of the domestic campaign and the start of the ridiculous European qualifiers that they've had to go through. So after playing under Brendan Rodgers and really, really up in his level, and my argument was at that point under Strachan, where Scotland were doing all right, it was Brendan Rodgers that was influencing a lot of that with the levels he was getting the Celtic players to hit, and that was having a beneficial effect for Scotland. But when it comes to, when you look at Callum McGregor right now, I just don't think he's playing with the same verve and energy that he did a couple of seasons back. And I don't just think it's like, Neil Lennon's sort of sapped his confidence or anything like that, because I don't think it's a confidence question. I don't think it's a question of application. I don't think it's anything like that. I think he's just a bit tired out, and he's a player that's really had the ability to keep going and going and going. Whereas you contrast that maybe with a Kieran Tierney, who has been, I think the longevity of his career will potentially have been affected by these arduous campaigns he's had with Celtic early on in his career. So that's the one question mark for me, is I think Steve Clarke will go with Callum McGregor, but I would be interested to see what other options there are in terms of that midfield mix. I mean, do you guys concur with that, or what do you reckon?
It's between Gilmour and McGregor for me, and I can't decide. I really can't.
Rory would go McGregor, probably, judging in the previous comment.
I think he'll go McGregor, Clarke.
Me too.
The Patterson O'Donnell one, I think that by this time next year, or certainly by the World Cup in 2022, I think Gilmour and Patterson will both be starters for Scotland.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think that O'Donnell's done enough to earn the jersey for me. I think functional is a good way to describe him. He kind of no frills, no spills. But we've scored one important goal, and we scored a goal this week as well from O'Donnell winning the ball in a high press against Serbia.
Good point.
Against Serbia. and also against Luxembourg. He won the ball on the right wing, gave it to Dykes, and then gave it to Adams. So O'Donnell, he's not a round peg in a square hole. Like he can play that role. It just so happens to be that there's a boy motoring along who's must be about 8 years younger than him, and definitely will go to a higher level than him, and will take his place in the Scotland team at some point. Callum McGregor, I don't think. I think that Celtic becoming a poorer team has just affected him. I think he runs smoother in a machine that is more well oiled than it has been this season, and I think that Gilmore could, and Rory touched on it, I think that Gilmore could improve that Scotland midfield, because I don't think that McGregor, and he was really good alongside Jack in Serbia. McGregor for me has never stamped his name all over the midfield jersey for us. I think he's been decent at best for Scotland, no more.
I think during that period I mentioned, under Strachan / Rodgers, I think he was really good then. But all the Celtic players were really good then.
I think it's worth considering games 2 and 3. If you're looking at the right back position, it's all about defensive ability. And throw in Nathan Patterson in to face Grealish or a Foden or Bricalo, Petkovic, Rebic, those guys that can all play out there. Both those teams are going to play front threes. Mm-hmm. So that's where you really need a switched on, experienced right back that isn't too concerned about going forward.
O'Donnell's not that fast. This actually crossed my mind, and I don't think it'll happen. But if Patterson would get a run out or start against England to try and deal with Sterling or Foden's pace, because Patterson's rapid, whereas O'Donnell isn't.
The one thing I would say about that is I think it makes sense to play a more defensive-minded player in games 2 and 3, and I think we might be likely to see Grant Hanley, rather than as the central stopper, playing as the right centre-back to counteract exactly what you're saying there, because Grant Hanley is a deceptively quick centre-back. People don't know how quick he is. He's second in the speed trials at Norwich. Wow. So I think that's a factor. Plus, obviously, playing under Daniel Farke, he's got better at stepping out. And there was against Luxembourg, there was a couple of nice wee switches of play. So I think that's maybe a factor. The construction of the defence was something I want to come on to, because there's a few different ways that could be put together. I'll bring up the squad again. So if you guys were reckoning right now, what do you think he's going to do in terms of how he puts that together? I wonder if Declan Gallagher's inclusion in the friendly maybe means that he was trying that out to see if that was a viable starting option. And I must admit, in the friendly, I was less impressed than I was in the Serbia game. Jack Hendry, again, scored a lovely goal against the Dutch, but I think in some of the recent qualification games, I think he's been exposed pretty badly. I think his positioning's still a bit haphazard at times. Scott McKenna, I don't think is really pushed on from his sort of early emergence. So that's the area of the team that I'm really kind of questioning. I'm looking at and going, I'm not really 100% sure either what the manager will do or how I would even go about it. The one thing I will say is I really, really like the 2 left backs for the price of 1. I think he's done really, really well, Steve Clarke, to answer that conundrum that we couldn't answer before. And I think the sort of overlapping and dovetailing between Tierney and Robertson works really well now. So
I think Tierney's become our best player. Yeah. I think in the last 100%. Year he has been absolutely incredible for Scotland. And like you say, because his natural instincts are to get forward.
Yep.
And he's obviously got Robertson out there as well. So he can underlap, he can overlap. He's playing that role for Arsenal as well. I just think that he has become this outstanding player for us. I think he's gone beyond what Robertson is, and that's not any slight on Andy Robertson, because I mean he's a world-class player. Yep. But for Tierney to have gone from the fact that he had to play right back or you're on the bench, to now being, I think, the most important player in our team. I think he's just an outstanding player. Who plays alongside him? I really struggle to pick between them. I think Hendry can take the ball out a little bit better than the rest. You certainly wouldn't want Grant Hanley, going for a mazy run over the halfway line, or Scott McKenna.
I feel like Cooper goes under the radar.
Hanley's getting a bit better. Not at the mazy runs, but he can step out better now than he used to.
Yeah. It's you kind of want a bit of balance on that right hand side, but I honestly, there's not one that really sticks out for me that you go, yeah, he definitely goes in the central area, or he goes on the right hand side of the three. I think that'll be they're the only two positions I think that are really tricky to pick.
Yeah, I think the other thing is it's such a shame that Liam Cooper is left-sided, because I think that if he was really comfortable sort of in the middle, maybe more two-footed, whatever, then it would kind of answer that question for itself, because I think quality-wise, that's the answer. And in that sort of aspect, he's kind of unfortunate that Kieran Tierney has adapted so well to his new role. But also from a tactical perspective, and without going and grabbing my anorak here, it's such an interesting aspect of Scotland tactically, this, because what it does is it gives us something that, England actually had something similar in the last World Cup, where they were playing a right back as sort of on the right side of the central part of the defence. And what it does is, if you do that, is it gives you an underlap potential every time, and it gives you a different sort of prong to your attack that other teams won't have, because if people go with a low block and condense the central area, then what that does is it obviously opens space on the outside. But Scotland actually have two men that they can have running at you there, who can both deliver quality and run at pace in terms of stuff. So either whether it's the overlap or the underlap, that left side of the Scotland team, you've got an extra man every time who can drive at the opposition defence from deep. I think that's really good.
They are both decoys as well, I think, because I'm not sure the opposition will know who or how to focus their attention on.
Absolutely.
If Tierney's the one on the ball coming forward, obviously someone has to try and stop him. But if two men go on him, then it's likely to leave Robertson in loads of space. Vice versa, if Robertson attracts two men to him, then Tierney should have enough space to underlap, as you say, and get into the opposition box for a cutback.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be really interesting.
I'm gonna reach for the left-footed chip on my shoulder right now.
Okay.
As somebody that grew up as a left-footer, how often do you see like two right-footed centre-backs in a back four and nobody mentions it? But if you've got two left-footed centre-backs in a back four, everyone going, oh, you can't play him out on the right-hand side because he's a left-footer.
That's a fair point.
That is a fair point. So
Cooper can easily play in the middle.
Yeah, he could play in the middle, but is he a stopper then, is my question. Because that's what you want the central guy to be. So, is that his natural sort of defensive domain, or is he more comfortable just playing sort of maybe a bit less aggressively, for want of a better way of phrasing it? So I think it's to do with roles, as well. And the good thing is Scotland are at a major tournament and we're getting to talk about these things. And to be honest, the construction of the team and the squad is, for the first time, I totally agree with the way the squad a Scotland manager is picked. And that's really good. Also want to come on to talk about Shea Adams, because he's added a completely different element to the mix of our attack. And park your cynicism at the door that he's just kind of jumped in the bandwagon to get a go at a major tournament. I think it's really good for Scotland, and I think the combination play between him and Dykes looks to be really strong. The other aspect of Shea Adams' game I really like is he's so good at picking up those spaces between the sort of middle third and the final third, whether that's centrally or pulling out wide. He's intelligent with his movement. He's not as quick as a lot of folk might think, but his running is powerful and he's intelligent, as I say, with that movement. So I think he's added a new dynamic to the mix. And between him and Dykes, I was really, really encouraged by some of the link-up play between those two. And I think that bodes quite well, as long as Dykes can start putting things in the net, which he obviously struggled a bit
for
against
me,
Luxembourg.
Hodgie, I think that it has to be Adams as the striker, and we decide who plays up there with him, rather than Dykes as the striker, and we decide who pairs him.
Interesting. So you wouldn't pick Dykes?
No, not necessarily. I think the starting point is Adams, and we decide who partners him, rather than.
Oh, right, I get you.
First,
yeah. So whether you've got him sort of leading the line, and then maybe a sort of what you would term more a midfielder, but an attacking sort of player in that veneer. Or
but I'm not opposed to Adams and Dykes playing together. But I think that we have to make Adams the focal point and decide who will work with him, rather than make Dykes the preferential striker and decide who works best with him.
Yeah, I think quality-wise, I would completely agree. Rory?
Yeah, I think it very much depends on the game and how deep you're sitting. And if you're needing to lump it, Lyndon Dykes is more likely to hang on to it or win a header up there than Che Adams, whereas Adams is more likely to run off a defender and use his power. It maybe comes down to the pairing. I think Dykes and Fraser works quite well. I'm not sure if Fraser and Adams would work quite so well. Whereas, I think Adams with Christie or Armstrong off him, I quite like the look of that. I think Dykes and Adams works. I think that they're trying to strike up a partnership, and like Andy says, it's given us a completely new dynamic. It used to be, right, this is the one striker and this is what we work off him. The fact that we do have the option to now play two, which you might do in the first game. I could see that in the first game.
5-3-2.
Play the two of them. And it would then be somebody like Christie or Armstrong that would miss out, or Turnbull.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Nisbet gives us a good option off the bench as well, because he's probably actually the best finisher out of the three of them.
He really impressed me as well. Like, see the way he was holding on to the ball when he came on against the Dutch. Like, I was really, really impressed by how he managed to do that. But one question is, if you play the two, though, does that slightly neutralise the threat of John McGinn, and that spaces are being occupied by other players a wee bit that he could potentially run into? Because I didn't see him have quite the sort of dazzling effect that he has in other games when the two of those guys were playing up front. And I don't know if that was just a sort of one-off kind of thing, because I'm only going back a couple of games really where that's happened. So, but I think you've got to make sure that John McGinn's got the platform to be the best version of John McGinn, because he is probably, would you say, maybe the most natural match winner in the team, in terms of the options that we've got right now, I would say.
I'd say him or Turnbull, probably.
Yeah, with a set piece. Aye.
I think it's important that we have McGinn arriving in the edge of the box, the way that Lampard used to do for the English. I actually read a crazy stat. Can't remember the player that is beating him. I think it might be Immobile or one of the Italians. Since Steve Clarke took charge, no player has scored more goals for their country in Europe than John McGinn, apart from one, and I'm sure it's an Italian player.
Wow.
Yeah.
Surely somebody like Lewandowski has scored about 50 goals since then.
For their country.
Aye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's only one. I read it was only one, and it's doing my head in that I can't remember who it was, but I'll research that. But yeah, he's 10 goals as McGinn scored since Clarke took charge, which is absolutely frightening levels for any centre mid, let alone a Scotland centre mid, when we're not always dominating games.
No, that's fair enough, chaps. I want to talk a wee bit about the other teams in the group. You guys obviously full-time commentators, so you know a bit more than maybe the average man about I think everyone kind of knows about England, so maybe focusing on the other two a wee bit. Start off with Croatia, just because people might be a bit more familiar with them, but how different does their team look to the 2018 team that people might remember quite well? Is there any sort of new aspects or new threats they've got, stuff we should be aware of with the Croats first off?
Losing Rakitic for them, I think, is really big, which I think takes a lot out of their game. And two of the others that were massive for them in Russia were Ivica Olic and Mario Mandzukic. So they've sort of had to reshape their attack quite a bit. That said, there are there are enough quality players in that side. I mean, Modric is still the boss in there, and alongside him, you've got Kovacic and Brozovic that are classy players. I actually think that Barisic gives them quite a good outlet on the left hand side. He's obviously one that we know about, and I think that that's an area that they might fancy, that they can do some damage. He sends some brilliant balls into the box for Rangers from deep, from the byline. It's the deeper ones. Who was it against? Was it Porto 2 seasons ago when he put in the huge deep cross to Morelos, who finished it with the sort of first time finish? And if the likes of, I like Rebic, that's up there, the AC Milan striker. Him or Kramaric, Petkovic. They've got enough quality to be able to do real damage, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. You concur with that, Andy? Anything to add, or will we move on to the Czechs?
No, yeah, just these aren't players that I watch every week, but there are enough names in there for us to, I don't think quake in our boots, but certainly approach the game with absolute caution of what they're capable of. Rory rhymed off the names. I mean, some of the clubs that these guys represent, even their 2 centre halves, Lovren and Vida, Besiktas and Zenit. I mean, that just screams awkward, stuffy hard men, doesn't it? So I think that is the sort of game where I can imagine that we'll stick Dykes up there probably to try and ruffle their feathers a bit.
Yeah,
we've never lost to Croatia.
Wild, isn't it? Absolutely wild. And
I think we've only played them 5 times, but we've won the last 2, including the game in Zagreb, which was an absolute joy. That was such a good trip as well. Croatia was just an awesome place.
So, in danger of annoying you, Rory, what that says to my Scottish mentality is their duty beat us. Czech Republic, then. I think this is a team that a few people probably know maybe a little bit about, because there's obviously that Slavia Prague team, and there's a sort of spine of players there that they've got from that. So a few people have seen them when Rangers obviously played them, and that was a very, very impressive on the field, or at least when dealing with the football side of it, Slavia Prague side. There's also a few sort of young kind of names that are expected to go on and have really good careers in the Czech national squad, but they've also had like some important injuries which could kind of weaken the threat that they have to pose. But I don't think anybody can be taken lightly at a major tournament when you're Scotland, and we're definitely not doing that. But are we a better team than the Czech Republic right now?
Oh, wow. No, I don't think so. Okay. I know that we beat them in the Nations League 1-0. That was a good performance that night. Ryan Fraser's lovely finish from Dykes through ball. I think we need to take the game before that out the equation, because it was, I think there's only 2 or 3 from that squad when they were decimated that has made it to the final, so it will be completely different. And it's interesting that my answer to your question is no. I was listening to the Tartan Scarf podcast the other day, my friend Gordon Sheik, and he'd interviewed a Czech journalist, and they see us as a bogey side. They don't like playing Scotland. Yeah. The Czech, he was a Czech football expert, blogger sort of guy, and he was saying we don't like playing against Scotland.
Thomas Danicek, by any chance? Because I'm in advanced talks to try and get him on the Tartan Daily.
He was from a website called Czech Footy.
Right, cool.
And he was saying that we don't like playing Scotland. They seem to do well against us, and I think that we do have a fairly good record. We've beaten them in 2 friendlies as well. We came close to a great victory over them at Hampden. It was a 2-2 game. They scored the last minute penalty when Levine was the manager. It was a dive from their striker.
And Rezek,
even though we've got a good record against them, and we've got some players from the Liverpool, Arsenal, and a Celtic core and stuff, I still look around at the squad, and I think that these guys are made up of. This squad is made up of guys that play for teams that would routinely beat our lot in Europe, and it is like Slavia players: Souček, is probably going to get a move this summer from West Ham to one of the big clubs.
Yeah, he's been really
Patrick Schick's, you got a Bayer Leverkusen, he's got a good record. He's in double figures and only about 25, 26 caps. You've got Vidra, who knows his way around a penalty box, and like players from Slavia and Legia Warsaw and Hoffenheim, like these sort of clubs that they might not be the most glamorous, but I think they certainly know how to take care of business.
It's not the Poborskis and Nedveds of previous eras, but it's still a really strong Czech team. It's really interesting to hear that they see us as a bogey team.
Yeah.
Wonder how many other countries see that, because you never think of Scotland in that kind of context.
Croatia, probably.
Aye, suppose so. Anything stick out for you, Rory?
I disagree slightly with Andy. I think we are better than them, or we should certainly see ourselves as better. I don't think that they've got anybody on a standard of a Robertson, a Tierney, or a McTominay.
Yes, probably.
What they maybe have is a little bit more of a balanced level, whereas we've maybe got a few guys who are right up here in with maybe some that are down here, and they're maybe got a whole squad that's maybe a little bit more level at that kind of Slavia Prague standard, which I was so impressed with them. Let's
really good.
Forget everything that went on with Andre Kudela, because that's got nothing to do with the football side of things. They're missing their best defender because of that. Yeah, which is absolutely the right call, and 10 games was far too little.
Should have been longer. Ridiculous.
Yeah, of course. If you want to send a message, then it's got to be longer. They have, having seen Sparta as well, absolutely dispatch Celtic in the group stages of the Europa League as well.
That was embarrassing for Celtic, by the
way. They cannot be underestimated in the slightest. I think we're at a very similar sort of level as them. I would maybe take that our top players are the three that I mentioned are probably just a bit better than theirs, being Souček, possibly Schick. I'm not totally sold on him, but Kufal as well. That's at West Ham. They're very, very good players, and I think Souček will, as you say, he'll get his move. The one that I really wanted to see I think it was November-ish time, was Adam Klojek. He's at Sparta Prague, and he was injured for the Celtic games, or he might have had a COVID. There might be a COVID issue around him. I'm not sure. He didn't play in either of the games. He's one that I would like to. Is he a teenager? Is that a teenager? Yeah, I think he's 18. He first came to my attention because I broke Hajduk Split's transfer record in Football Manager for him, and he was awesome.
I knew you were going to say Football Manager, mate. We're so me and my mates for Norwich, we started a network game at the start of lockdown, and we're now entering the 11th season of it, and we're all new. Like we started in the Championship with English clubs, and then we're all new sort of in the Premier League. I've had Norwich in the Champions League for 4 years. Ironic that they're all from Norwich, and I'm the one in charge of them. Started off at Barnsley, went quite well, but Adam Klozek has been part of my mate Joe's QPR team, which has won Europa League, has won various sort of honours during that time, and Klozek has been part of that team since, I think, pretty much near the start of the game, so I think that's what happens now. Obviously, for on that game, there's a lot of research goes into the clubs use the database now. When someone's as good as that young guy, then I mean, it does. Him being as good on that game actually does demonstrate somewhat he's potential, at least, to go on and have a good career. Now, we all know about the Cherno Sambas of the world without going too deep down that rabbit hole. So they don't always get it right. But I think he's a name that a few people will be familiar with for that reason, actually. So I think it'll be interesting to see how. Do you think he's likely to play on the right then, if he's playing against us, playing the right wing, or do you think they would deploy him up front?
I don't think he'll start.
No,
I think if he comes on, if he plays, he comes on, and it's probably playing off the right hand side. I would think, from what I've seen of him.
Mm-hmm. Just looking at his goal record for Sparta this season, he was a joint top scorer with 15 goals, and he gets 7 assists as well. He was a joint top scorer in the division, 18 years old, 15 goals, and he missed 4 months of the season.
Right. What I'm going to do, lads, is I'm going to rattle through that's. I mean, that tells you its own story. Those stats. I am going to rattle through some fan questions because we don't want to go on too long here. I think we'll wrap up at about the 90-minute mark. And I know you've got to nip off, Andy. So we'll run through some fan questions. Then I'm going to get some predictions from you, which you'll be looking forward to. So thanks for everyone who stayed watching, and thanks for staying patient to go through these questions. So I'll come back to one which was I put up earlier on, which we didn't actually come round to answering from Ollie Middleton. Any players who didn't get a chance to play a major tournament over the past 20 years who you would really want in the squad? So if we maybe limit this to 2 or 3 each, who would you really have in there? Now, McFadden's one for me.
Yeah, McFadden. On ability, I think it's maybe a different thing on ability and on merit. Because I think that
I'm going to bring emotion into the equation in my answer as well. Yeah. Like who I feel kind of would have deserved it, you know.
For that reason, then 2 for me would be Kenny Miller and Darren Fletcher.
Yeah, that's 2 of mine struck off the list.
Yeah, that's fine. You're only getting 3, so we're going McFadden, Miller, Fletcher. We'll just make that.
I'm going to chuck in Maloney in there for me because he's my favourite Scotland player.
Fair enough.
I was going to throw in, and he's actually still playing, Alan McGregor.
Oh, yeah.
Although we have outstanding goalkeepers, I think Alan McGregor's the best of the lot right now. He's just been immense for Rangers. I think he would probably be our number one.
Mm-hmm.
You reckon ahead of Marshall even? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know what I found quite interesting when Craig Gordon was starting is looking at the kind of contrast, because obviously we've been really blessed to have 3 world-class goalkeepers, or verging on world-class goalkeepers anyway, and at times I think they've all hit that level in some way or another. I think it's nice to see, and it was lovely to see some of the comments as well from Craig Gordon, I think it was, after Marshall was obviously the penalty hero and stuff, and he's like, yeah, well, he's waited his turn, you know, because for years Gordon was the pick, and then it was McGregor, you know, and Marshall's getting his chance again now, and it's nice to see them all have that. But when Craig Gordon was playing, I found it quite interesting to see the kind of contrasting abilities, and because Craig Gordon's always a deceptively good shot stopper with his big frame, but sometimes he'll be sort of caught flat-footed, and David Marshall's kind of moving quick. Then again, I still think positioning-wise, there's kind of different idiosyncrasies about the way they both go about their business. So I still think it's 2 good keepers.
What I find really interesting is, and it's probably more of a historical thing, that the English used to, there was a joke about Scottish goalies. And then you think of what we've had in our time growing up. Well, you know, you had Leighton versus Gorham, and then you've had these 3. You've got, you know, Marshall, Gordon, and McGregor. I would take those 3 over the trio of Dean Henderson, Sam Johnson, and Jordan Pickford. I think all 3 of them are better.
Yep, I totally agree. And anyone that's English and watching this, let us know if you disagree. But I would definitely do that. Nick Miller asks, would you like to see more friendly games with England, or maybe the British sort of trophy and the home internationals brought back?
No, not really. I like my foreign trips too much, and going down to England doesn't excite me as much. Yeah. Going to Wales doesn't excite me as much. I like going to far-flung places that I've got to get planes, trains, and automobiles and the back of a horse to get to the stadium.
That'll do for me. Quite enjoy the rivalry when we play specifically Republic of Ireland and England. And I don't want that to be diluted with constant fixtures. I quite like the fact that I had to wait 13 years of my life for one. And then a few came along at once, but like when we were drawing England in the qualifiers a few years ago, that was an amazing feeling to draw them, and I wouldn't want to have that emotion taken away by knowing, we're playing them again next year.
And if we just held out, because the way that Lee Griffiths played chicken with Joe Hart will live in my memory forever.
So that was 4 years ago today.
Was it?
No.
Oh, what timing for the first Tartan Daily. Brilliant. Best player you have seen in a Scotland shirt, lads? Thanks for the question, Adam. I will say, well, the chin stroke without chin stroking.
Probably for the Maverick moments would be McFadden, probably.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, ability-wise then. And maybe, see, it's hard because ability-wise, when he's playing at his absolute peak, it's obviously McFadden. I mean, he's Lionel Messi in another universe, as I say.
If you want to make it, Hodge, if you want to make it relative and talk about career span and impact on a team,
yes,
Anya. I'm not saying that he's the best player that Scotland, but for the 3 or 4 years that he was in the team and then disappeared, he had a massive impact and he was brilliant.
That's a left field selection. I will say that, but I really like your thinking behind it. I think if you look at gravitas of career that they've had, Darren Fletcher, because I mean was an absolute pivotal figure in some brilliant Man United teams. Had it not been for obviously his issues with his sort of stomach and things, I think he would have had an even better career than he did, and it was still a glittering career that he had. And you could tell he was one of those people that, without being forceful or bullshit about it, he just commanded respect in any dressing room he was in, including a Man United dressing room that was full of leaders. So
there was a good spell where he was Fergie's go-to guy. Yeah. Big games.
Exactly.
He was the one that almost first name in the team sheet in a squad of that type of quality. So yeah, I think Fletcher. I mean, if you're looking at because we're talking about the last 25 years type thing, how many have we had any world class players? And Fletcher sort of maybe, McFadden in his moments, yes. Robertson, I think, is. Gary McAllister, I think, in his time, absolutely.
I must admit there's a bit of recency bias with mine.
Yeah.
It's players that I've properly engaged with their journey.
Yeah.
And Ikechi Anya's it's a brilliant one to bring up, Andy, because it was just, I mean, during that period, he was so important for Scotland. And he was one of those where it was these moments for Scotland that you really, really sort of remember as kind of key.
He scored the goal against Germany, obviously, which is his big one. But we would not have scored that goal again. And we've been singing his praises throughout half of the podcast. But against Slovakia, Scuttle's own goal, Tierney wouldn't have made that assist on the right side. If Anya hadn't replaced him, there's no way that we're in that position to cut the ball back, because Tierney, when he was playing right back, he was always very hesitant to go over the halfway line, really. And Strachan recognised that and thought, right, we need to get into their final third. On comes Anya, and we get a goal.
I've accidentally hit the mute button. Best and worst Scotland shirts, including away. Last question from Nick Miller that we're going to bring up. What's your favourite Scotland top? I know my favourite, and it's the Tartan Euro 96 shirt. And the worst one was the orangey pinky, I'm not sure whereabouts, in a Dulux colour shirt.
It's for me the best and the worst one is the orange, purple, white, jaggy one.
Right. So I'm talking about that. It was the kind of, I don't know, would it peach maybe?
And it was salmon. Salmon one.
Salmon. Right. There we go. Aye. So that's definitely the Gads. Like,
you don't like that, no?
No, I didn't like
that one.
I didn't really like the two recent away ones, the neon pink one and the white one with the stripes across it. I wasn't really fussed on either of them.
Yeah, I never like a pin, because I mean it's easy to pick the away ones. I never like a pinstripe top, and I remember the one. The player that I remember in it was Kenny Miller, and I think maybe Kevin Kyle. And it was just navy with
I remember.
White.
It was a Fila kit.
For me. That was it. A Bertie Vogts special. No, do you know what? Do you know what was amazing about that, Rory? Like, I was like, pinstripe, and I'm thinking to myself, what pinstripe? Then you said Kenny Miller. I pictured it. Like, and
he scored. I think he scored against Italy or Germany in that kit. I think Germany.
Oh, I think you're right. It's the Germany one. Yeah.
I always argue, right? I always argue that one of the hardest games of probably the best centre-back pairing I've seen in my life, Fabio Cannavaro and Alessandro Nesta, they never got a moment's peace in that game at Hampden. He was absolutely amazing in that game, Kenny Miller.
Yeah.
And I'll always remember that. Right, last thing
it
we're
was
going to do.
the same in that Germany game that you mentioned as well.
Yeah.
I can't remember who was playing
was the
centre-back
thing.
for Germany in that game, but he ran them ragged.
He lifted it against the bigger teams. Like, he absolutely did. And
big game player, Miller. Yeah, he should be remembered very, very well by Scotland fans.
Scored an amazing goal when I watched Scotland at Wembley the last time I was.
The turn and hit.
Yeah, what a goal that was. Ricky Lambert, I think, scored for England as well. Which is another noteworthy thing about that game. Right, last thing we're going to do, gents, is some predictions. And just Scotland-based, really. So first thing I'm going to get you to do is, can you please predict the 11? Thank you very much, John Bleasdale. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. Obviously, a dandy done. First 11 for the first game. What was he going to go with? Just to aid you in your quest, I'll bring up the squad list again, gents. So we'll go with you, Andy, first. What do you expect the first 11 to be?
Marshall, Hendry, Hanley, Tierney, Robertson, O'Donnell, McTominay, McGregor, McGinn, Adams, Dykes.
Cool. Concurring, Rory?
Yep, that's exactly what I've got.
Yep, that's fine.
Easy.
Points tally. What are we going to get in the group?
5.
4.
4. 5. I take it we're beating the Czechs then.
No, we're drawing with the Czechs and Croatia.
I love it. I so hope you're right. So, what are the actual results going to be then, gents? And I'm talking scores.
I think that we will beat the Czech Republic 1-0.
Mm-hmm. Proper Steve Clark scoreline. I like it.
Yeah. I cannot see it being a high-scoring game at all. I can't see any of our games being high-scoring, to be honest. England, I'm going to say that England will beat us, sadly. I think that their front three are just mind-blowing, and I'm not sure we'll be able to keep them out. So I'm going to go that England will beat us 2-0, and I think we will draw 1 each with the Croats.
Fair enough. So that gives us a goal difference of -1, interestingly.
But 4 points.
Rory?
So I'm sticking to my 5 points. I do actually think the win will come against the Czech Republic. So I'm going to go 2-1 in that game, 1-1 at Wembley, and 1-1 against Croatia.
Run that by me again, sorry.
2-1 against the Czechs, 1-1 at Wembley,
and
1-1 against Croatia.
Right, so I'm going to go that we're going to beat the Czech Republic by 2-0. We are going to get beat by England by 2-1. And we are going to draw 0-0 with Croatia or lose late. It's one of the two. But yeah, that's the way I think the kind of denouement of the group will go. Last one is who are the scorers going to be, and how many goals are they going to get? So if you think back to your results, what are you reckoning in terms of scorers and goal tally? Or if it's easier, just pick a top scorer and number of goals.
I think Adams will score for us.
Yeah, me too. And I think John McGinn has
50.
to.
Yeah. McGinn with 2, I think will be our top scorer.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've kind of got for that. Excellent. Right, last thing then is, gents, just tell us where people can find you guys and the kind of work you're going to be doing throughout the tournament. So feel free to plug social media things and stuff if you wish at this point.
So I'll be doing the commentary on STV with Kevin Gallagher as co-commentary. That's on games 2 and 3, so England and Croatia. And if you want to send me abuse, then you can on @Rory Hamilton on Twitter.
People are always
Please don't.
remarkably nice to you, I've noticed on Twitter.
I know.
Like,
I
you
don't
have a
get it
nice
too bad,
positive engagement on there. Not everyone does.
Let's keep it that way.
That's all right. I'm sure the whole England and the Gammon Brigade will be after you if we win. Andy, what about yourself, mate?
Yeah, just the one game for me. I'm doing England against Scotland on TalkSPORT next Friday. Still feels a bit weird saying that, to be honest. So they're splitting the frequency with the choice of listening to the English fellas. It's Jim Proudfoot and Stuart Pearce. And then if anyone wants to listen to myself and Paul Dickoff and TalkSPORT 2 with a Scottish slant on the commentary, then they can.
I've done commentary with a former Leicester legend that played for Scotland myself, but that was Matt Elliott, not Paul Dickoff. And obviously you've got the Hampden Roar in your handle. Tell people about the podcast and what you're doing with that, mate.
Yeah, Hampden Roar started a few years ago now with the sole purpose and intention of interviewing former Scotland players and managers about their international days. No club chat or anything, just pure Scotland. Still do that from time to time. Recently this year I've interviewed Davy Weir, Stuart McCall, Darren Jackson, some really good guests, but now intertwined with that, probably a monthly basis, depending on when we've got games coming up, I'll do squad discussions, reviews like this, and previews of games coming up, and talking about the flashpoints and the talking points and whatever. So yeah, we've got a good wee pool now of contributors. Rory's been on it as well, talking about his Scotland memories growing up that we touched on at the start, and a lot more. And yeah, it's just a great wee hobby to have, because I felt there was no real just purely Scotland focused podcasts or content out there. Yeah, so yeah, it does okay.
Aye, no, it's the John Bleasdale then saying Hampden Roar is a tremendous podcast. Recommend it. So thanks to anyone as well. Yeah,
I've got some breaking news.
Oh, on you go.
The SPFL has a new title sponsor. 5-year deal with Chinch. I don't know what it is. UK's fastest growing online used car marketplace.
Okay.
It screams out Hollywood. That's what I'll say. So, aye, no, that's good. Obviously, if we were going into sort of club stuff and Scottish stuff, we would talk about Celtic's new boss. But this is a Scotland podcast. It's the Tartan Daily, not the Scottish Fitbar All-In Daily. But listen, gents, thank you very much for joining me today. It's what a way to open up the Tartan Daily. But that's it for now. You can subscribe to the podcast on all your favourite podcast platforms, as well as on YouTube. If any of you guys who have watched the stream today have come and migrated because you like Andy or you like Rory and you like their content, then I hope you do with myself as well. So you can find me at Hodgeythehack. That's HODGEY The Hack on all social media channels. If you can give me or the podcast a wee follow or a wee like, regardless of the platform you're listening on, that would be much appreciated. And if you're among the fraternity watching live on Facebook or YouTube, then hit the wee bell for a reminder of when I'm going live with a new stream, which will, of course, be tomorrow, because this is the Tartan Daily, and I'm going to do them every day until we go out. That's my promise to you. So I've got a good idea for tomorrow's episode. If it comes off, I'll be buzzing, and hopefully you will be too. But yes, make sure and share this episode if you enjoyed it, please, and use hashtag the Tartan Daily to do so if you're doing it on socials, because then people can find them easily. So thank you to everyone who's watched live today, and to anyone who listens in subsequently on the podcast. Stay safe, and let's gear up for next week. Remember as well, no Scotland, no party.